What's up, guys, and welcome back to MoAn. If you guys are new here, then what is up? My name's Erica. Hey, yeah, nice to meet you. And if you're into the mythology or the history of the ancient Greeks and the Romans, well, then this is the channel for you. You guys are going to want to hit that subscribe button below and that bell icon so that you know every single time I post in the future. But let's move on to today's topic, because we're going to be continuing our women's only series here on the channel. And today we're going to be discussing Aspasia. Now, Aspasia is the first real life lady that we're discussing, okay? Everybody prior to this point has been mythological. Today, we have a woman who is actually like walking down the street like me and you, unless you're a man, it just occurred to me, not like you. She's been walking down the street like us ladies, living her best life. And we're gonna be talking about her today, which I'm so excited about because she is such a fascinating woman to have existed once upon a time in ancient Greece. Who is Aspasia though? Aspasia is actually from Miletus, which is in Asia Minor, and she moved over to Greece, and she is a hetaera. So hetaera, spelled like this, and what a hetaera is in ancient Greece is basically a very high-end courtesan. That's a good word. Yeah, she's basically a very high-end like prostitute, essentially, is what she is. More like an escort. That was her whole role. Now you might be wondering, how is she so important? How is she so fascinating if she just does that? Well, a hetaera, they were just reserved for the elite. So hetaeras were very well educated. They were fun. They were like great to be around. They could have stimulating conversation. They were supposed to be incredibly smart. And literally Aspasia is like the highest of the high. She was the most famous. Everybody loved her, and that is why we have her on record from ancient times, which is amazing. We love the representation, and we love the fact that she is smart and funny and amazing, and people loved her. So Aspasia is most famous for being connected to the famous Athenian general Pericles. He was like the golden boy in the golden age of Athens. He did his whole like funeral orations thing. We have spoken about him briefly on the channel, but he was the real reason why she was so famous, because they were sort of a thing. Okay, we're gonna get into more detail about that because it's hella cute, and every single time I read it, I'm like, oh my god, he loved her so much. But she does pop up in two different sources. So she pops up first in Plato, and then later on the Roman writer Plutarch picks up on her and elaborates on who exactly she was, so we get a very nice profile of who Aspasia is as a person. We also know that there are like two lost works that do also include mentions to Aspasia, because both of them reference them, which is unfortunate. Both of them do chat about, you know, like other people who have mentioned them, but we don't have those, because if you don't know, then like 97% of what we have from the ancient world is gone, which is very upsetting. So we only have those two places with Aspasia, and then we know that two others existed. So if you think like there were two others that existed, how many more others mentioned Aspasia? Probably loads, okay? She was like amazing. But let me explain why she was amazing, okay? So we're gonna be mostly referencing Plutarch, because in Plutarch, we get a full sort of scope of who Aspasia was from the beginning, right up until she stops being important in Greek history. So we find out from Plutarch that actually Aspasia was really inspired by this other Ionian woman, which is where she's from. She was actually inspired by this other Ionian woman by the names of Targelia. Targelia. It's spelled like this, okay? I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce it, because I've never been told about Aspasia in class. Like, she's just someone that I have read about extensively for the last couple of years, because I'm just like, why aren't we being taught about her? Either way, she was inspired by that lady, and that lady was super smart. She was also a hetaera. She was super smart. Every man loved her. Every man loved her company. And supposedly that was like kind of like the business model that Aspasia took on when she then went to Greece herself. So she goes to Greece, she ends up being a hetaera, which is, you know, like I said, the sort of like elite courtesans escorts. She ends up doing that, and she becomes incredibly popular in Greece. In fact, the main description that we get in Plutarch of Aspasia is that she was clever and she had this incredible political expertise. That's the introduction to her, okay? It's not like, oh, she was really pretty. It's like the first things that he says are that she was undeniably one of the most clever women in the entire room, in every room, and that her political expertise was like beyond everybody else. So tick to Plutarch for describing somebody not based off their like personal looks and all that kind of jazz. We love it. I love it. This is then when we get the reference actually back to Plato's work, and Plato's work is under this name. It's not a very popular text, okay? It's Menexenus. I don't know where you put the stress. Once again, I never read that in class. I only read that after studying Aspasia by myself for the last couple of years. But it's in that text that actually we get Socrates referencing Aspasia. And what's really interesting about this reference, and I really do advise everybody to go into this text for themselves, is that we have this reference to Aspasia that pops up, But everybody else in the conversation knows who Aspasia is. So there's no introduction to who she is, that they're just kind of talking. And then all of a sudden, someone's like, oh, you must mean Aspasia. And they're like, yeah. But no, everyone else knows who she is. So she was so well known that even the crowd running around with Socrates knew who Aspasia was. And actually, it's from this text, and Plutarch highlights this too. I just pointed to my book, by the way. I do have one that I'm going to show you. But it's Socrates in this text who says Aspasia is the one who's actually behind all of Pericles' great speeches, because he was supposed to, I mean, we have his speeches recorded. They were fantastic. He was supposed to be incredible in person as well. And Socrates says that it's actually because of Aspasia. And all the other guys in the conversation are like, Socrates, come on. Like, what are you trying to say? And he says that actually Aspasia would run speeches by him to check for like grammar and syntax and all that kind of stuff. So Socrates would help her in regards to all of that, which they think he's lying. And then literally guys in the text, he just like regurgitates one of the speeches that Pericles ended up saying that Aspasia wrote. And I had to make a note of this on my little scrap paper just down here, because the guy who the text is named after, he even says after Socrates does this whole speech, he says, quote unquote, Aspasia, by your account, deserves to be congratulated if she is really capable of composing such a speech like that. Woman though she is. Like, he ruins it with the last little bit, the woman though she is. But it shows that, like, even they were, like, massively impressed by things that she had done. So, she was super popular. Socrates apparently knew her, which is really cool. And Plutarch does then stress that as well, that he's like, this is where I'm getting my sources from too. It's Socrates, it's Plato. So now we know that she's super popular among the elite. And actually, this is how Pericles meets her in Athens. So Pericles meets her and literally falls head over heels in love with Aspasia, which I'm such a big fan of. He falls massively in love with her, and Plutarch records that actually he ended up leaving his wife so that he could be with Aspasia. So I do have a little, quote. Oh my goodness, guys, it's so cute. The little quote from this is, if you guys want to go to it yourself, it is, well, unfortunately, this is just page 166. This is what my copy looks like if you have it. And he says of Pericles, he says, while he himself took Aspasia, whom he loved very much. And then a couple lines later, he says that Pericles used to greet her with a kiss. Oh my God. That's like not a normal thing for like Athenian men. Like, you don't marry somebody because you love them. And so just adding in that like teeny tiny detail that whenever Pericles would meet her, he would have to kiss her. I was just like, oh my God, stop. But he was so in love with her. Like, to the point where we don't actually know if he broke the law, because there was actually a law in place that he had okayed a couple of years before that stated that Athenian citizens could not marry like an alien, basically somebody who wasn't an Athenian citizen. So you had to marry within the city to keep it like nice and Athenian always. So he couldn't marry Aspasia, and we don't know if he broke those laws, but a number of people do suggest that he probably managed to like get around it some way, somehow, because he was that obsessed with Aspasia, which I would love if we ended up finding something that said Pericles actually legally married Aspasia because he just had to. Like, oh my God, guys. It's unfortunate though, because she was a hetaera, that actually did impact the way that people saw her, the way that the average person saw her. And Plutarch does harp on that. He does say that people were so preoccupied with the idea that she was a hetaera, it didn't matter how smart she was, it didn't matter how great at speeches she was, because everybody kind of thought that she was writing all of Pericles' speeches. Not just Socrates thought this, but it didn't matter because she was a hetaera. And actually he notes that she had like a whole house filled with like young prostitutes. So she was essentially running like her own little like brothel type thing. And also common people. He does quote a bunch of like common people who spoke about Aspasia, and they call her like a whore and all of these very degrading words that are attached onto her. And the last story that I think actually just really emphasizes like how much respect people in ancient times had for Aspasia, even though she was just a hetaera to the common person, not to the elite. Bear in mind, the common person called her all these horrible things, but the elite loved her. And it's actually that there was this guy called Cyrus, okay? If you guys watch my Xenophon episode, I mentioned him in that. He's a real person as well. He was a general, and he did the whole like March of the 10,000 into Persia. Now, right before that, he had his own mistress, okay? He had his own little hetaera that would hang out with him, this really beautiful girl, whose name was Milto, okay? That was her legal, like that was her name. But he was so obsessed with Aspasia that he changed her name to Aspasia. And I love it. It just shows that she was such a celebrity and people loved her so much that he literally looked at his own mistress and went, why aren't you more like her? And named her Aspasia. Oh God, it's just such a brilliant detail. I just think it's so incredible. And Aspasia is, once again, in Plutarch, if you go to, let me just show you my book again. If you go to this text, you can go to the Pericles chapter. That's where it's all written. I have all my notes in here and all that kind of stuff. She only gets like a page and a half in there. And then in Socrates, she gets a couple of, well, in Plato through Socrates, she gets a couple of mentions for an extended period of time throughout the dialogue. But that's it. Those are the only references that we have of this real life woman who both parties say that she was clever, she was smart, she was fun to be around, she was incredibly popular, she wrote Pericles' speeches, and she was really the brains behind the whole operation. Like, this was a very, very strong, very popular woman, real woman in ancient Greece. So I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I enjoy talking about it, because I love Aspasia. If you have any more questions about her, we will be putting all of the like Plutarch stuff and all of that on our website. So that is linked in the description below. You're gonna wanna go to www.moaninc.co.uk to check that out. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm really excited to be talking about all of these ladies. Now we're finally getting to the real ladies of ancient history. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll be seeing you again next time with more ladies here on MoAn. So we'll see you then.